Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to The 10, your favorite Big Ten sports betting show. I am Greg Waddell, your host. Doug Kezirian is here. Troy Macker will be joining us later in the show. We have another great weekend slate of college hoops to attend to today. Before we get into it all, we've got a promotion at BetRivers you won't want to miss. It's our College Sports Rush bonus bet promo. Get a $10 bonus bet to use on college basketball with this special giveaway from BetRivers and from College Sports Rush. Go to your BetRivers app and enter the bonus code CSR22 to get a $10 bonus bet to use on any college basketball game. Again, that code is CSR22. This offer ends on February 15th, so this is the final time you'll hear this promotion from me before the offer ends. You must be 21. Eligible players only. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. There is one huge Friday night game in this league. We will start there. You see, I got my Badger shirt on today. It is the Wisconsin Badgers playing host to Tom Izzo's Michigan State Spartans. Spartans, road favorites here by 2.5, total 147.5. What do you like, Doug?
No, not a whole lot. And I'm excited to watch the game, but it's a really tough handicap for me because it's almost like two teams I've sworn off betting. Not entirely, but for the most part, I like to avoid their games. With the Badgers, it's pretty obvious because the variance in their performance is just so unpredictable. I know sports are unpredictable in general, but really with Wisconsin, they can beat anyone and they can certainly lose to anyone. So it's really tough to figure out. I think we know we're going to get a good effort out of them at home against Sparty, but Michigan State's similar, right? Obviously, Izzo pushing all the right buttons with fears in that monster win at home against Illinois. And it's been a while since we've seen him on the court. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. I think Wisconsin's going to be right there. I just think there's more ways to win for the Badgers here than Michigan State has. But I also think the variance is just too significant for whiskey. And maybe it's just shooting related, but I have to pass here. But I guess I lean to the home dog, but I'm not thrilled about it.
I think there's a chance we get an under here, but I share your hesitation in terms of side confusion. I think Spot had Wisconsin lost to Illinois in regulation. I'm looking at this game and I'm probably talking myself into a Wisconsin money line ticket. However, that's an overtime game with a huge emotional high. You really don't know how this shooting variance is going to go for Wisconsin, and they may be short on legs. You've got a Michigan State team that should be well rested, that has had a couple extra days to prep. The thing is, if this was last year's Michigan State team with all the depth and the bench that wore teams down, I think I love the Spartans. This year's team has injury concerns and really has to lean on Fears and Kohler and Cooper to play 32 to 35 minutes for games like this. It's a stay away from me because I think it's going to come down to how Wisconsin shoots. I think for me, I like the under. I lean to it just because I do think both teams, could potentially be short on legs in this game. Both teams coming off of overtime performances their game before. I want no part of either side as much as I would love to bet this game. Let's see if maybe Troy has some thoughts to add some depth to this for us. Troy, what do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, I don't want either side in this game. I was initially potentially wanting Michigan State. I just think it's hard to fathom them losing 3 or 4, albeit close games. And the fact that this line has moved from 1.5 to 2.5, my initial thought was, well, if it stays at 1.5, if you think Michigan State's going to win, maybe you buy a point and you get them Michigan State to win by 2 or 3. Typically, when they lose, it's by 3 in close games on the road, like Nebraska, the Minnesota game. But for Wisconsin is just so untrustworthy that if Michigan State's going to win, I think it's by more than 3, but I just don't know. This is a stay away from me. But the over/under is interesting. As you'd expect, the public is backing Michigan State unders, 59% of the money and 59% of the tickets. Not super strong, but anytime it's 60% or lower on the over, that is indicative of a public unders play. And Michigan State has been one of the strongest unders teams in the Big Ten this year. Wisconsin, surprisingly, has been an overs team for the most part, come back to earth a little bit. But here are 2 interesting trends. Each of Wisconsin's last 6 games against AP top 25 teams have produced a total of 150 or higher. And the total right now is 145.5. And each of Michigan State's last 4 games have gone over the total points line. Now, I don't have the gumption to bet on an over in a game with a team that is wildly inconsistent and Michigan State. But I think that is interesting that Michigan State has been hitting overs, and when Wisconsin is playing teams better than them because they are not a top 25 team, that it is going over as well. So even though the public's on an under, which is a surprise, and the trend suggests overs in a game with a team that is a historical unders team, I'm just very surprised by this. But this is a stay away for me personally. But there are certainly trends here suggesting that the over could be the play here.
All right, you've given me enough. I'm staying away from that under as well. Thank you, Troy. Okay, let's move to a great Saturday slate, beginning with the Adai Mara Mick Cronin reunion in Ann Arbor. The Michigan Wolverines could be potentially playing for the #1 spot in the AP poll, favored by 16.5 against a UCLA team that has turned things around. Midseason Mick has won 5 of their last 6. Totals at 151.5. And I don't know how much you guys have paid attention to the press clippings. There's been some bad blood from Mick Cronin toward Mara, refusing to say that he's improved at all since he's left UCLA. Doug, what are your thoughts?
Oh, at first glance, the number looks a little high, but I'm not going to overreact either to Michigan playing with their food and starting out sluggish on the road against Northwestern in its last game. The Wolverines have been on a nice run, coming out a little flat on the roads, not the worst thing in the world. Everyone sort of does it. It happens. One of those kind of justifications, if you will. 9 a.m. tip or 9:45 a.m. tip here for the Bruins. I think they have enough size to kind of keep things okay with Mara and everything. But I also think the Wolverines, if they catch fire, UCLA might be pretty limited because they can go through some scoring droughts. And I just think they don't have a lot of weapons. With that being said, it's a big number. I lean to the dog here, but I'm not in a rush to bet this one either. I do think the Wolverines, spurt ability or whatever you want to say, can kind of blow this game open. No rush to bet this. I think I'd rather grab points like this against Michigan when it's on the road, not at Chrysler. So I'll pass here.
I'm going to pass too. It's such an enormous number. And I do kind of just want to point out how jarring it is to me. This is a UCLA team that's 17-7, firmly in the NCAA tournament, and just 16.5 point dogs. Like you rarely see this. We saw it a little bit with Duke in the ACC last year, but this is the Big Ten. UCLA is a good team that's catching 16.5 points. You also get it because Michigan's ceiling is that high. And maybe more importantly for this matchup, I think Michigan is not the type of team UCLA wants to see. They can throw multiple different types of coverages against Donovan Dent. They'll switch everything with Merez Johnson and Yaxel Lendeborg on him, and then they'll play that drop with Mara in the middle, and Dent is so dependent on finishing at the rim. I just don't like that matchup for him. The path here for UCLA is bombing from 3. You would think they need Xavier Booker, who's been playing better lately, to do that tomorrow at the 5 a little bit. Problem is Booker's just going to get beat up inside. This is not a good rebounding team, and Michigan's been elite in the last month on the offensive board. So I see a Michigan blowout. At the same time, it's such a huge number. They could be looking ahead, too. They go to Mackey Arena on Tuesday. You can't tell me they haven't circled that game, so stay away is my advice.
I wanted to ask you about that. So you mentioned it. You hit the nail on the head that the Wolverines could be #1 in the next poll. Do you think that was sort of the reason they, I don't know, played tight with Northwestern because it happened after Arizona lost to KU, and maybe that was in some of their heads?
I really don't have an explanation for what we saw in that first half against Northwestern. I mean, the Wolverines scored on 21 straight possessions in the second half once they just lean forward in their seat a little bit. It's absurd what this team does when they're engaged. They were very disengaged early, and Cadeau was all over the place. And it reminded me of that Penn State game where they looked up and were in a 2-point game down the stretch. I don't think it's a coincidence that maybe the least sexy games on the schedule have been 2 of Michigan's worst performances here. You would think with the Mara story that you get Michigan's attention a little bit from the opening tip, but then again, big one in Mackey, like I said. It would not surprise me at all if they're looking ahead. Speaking of Purdue, let's go there next. It's going to be Purdue at Iowa here, a game that is made much more interesting in terms of spot, given Iowa's loss to Maryland earlier this week. Now you get Iowa as home underdogs here. Purdue -1.5. I believe Iowa is +102 on the money line at Bet Rivers. Totals 141.5. Anything for you, Doug?
I'm not going to react too strongly to Iowa's loss. I was on the Hawkeyes. We discussed it in the last show, but you know what? When you have 3-point shooting and you have numbers that can kind of go south even when they're open, right? 7 of 28 from downtown against the Terps. It's not like Maryland played that great, although they played better than they normally have. They still gave up 70 to an Iowa team that only made 7 threes and 25% from 3. So this is still a bad defense. I don't think Iowa all of a sudden collapsed offensively. The Purdue's more polished at times, but I think Iowa's a little too limited. I think that's sort of been my um, assessment of things. They can shoot and they're well coached, but I don't know if they have a bunch of weapons like maybe Nebraska does, right? Like obviously, master of the obvious. We know Nebraska's better. It's just I think that sometimes. So I wonder if Purdue gets them here. I was expecting a Purdue push later in the season, like conference tournament time, and I thought they've done a nice job of picking themselves off the mat after those 3 losses. The win at Nebraska really solid, and they got Michigan on deck. I think this is a little tricky spot. Hawkeyes probably get it done. I would lean to Iowa here.
Okay, I lean Purdue. I think I'm going to end up playing Purdue here, and that probably doesn't surprise any regular listeners. I've been a Purdue believer much of this season. I look at what happened the first time these two teams played in Mackey Arena. It was pretty much an even game on the boards, which is surprising because Iowa's not a great rebounding team. But really, the story of that game, Iowa role players shot the lights out. You had Kyle Combs going crazy from 3 in that game. You had Tavion Banks was 3 for 3. Those two combined 7 for 8 from 3 in Mackey Arena. Kyle Combs, for what it's worth, since that 4 for 5 night, is 2 for 9 from 3 in all his games combined since then. If you've listened to Ben McCollum recently, he's basically said Bennett's giving us everything he's got, playing 40 minutes a night. We need somebody else to step up and make a play. That's how they hung around with Purdue the first game. They haven't had that in a month since. Now, maybe it wakes them up again against a team they had success with at home, obviously in a big spot. But I tend to think that Purdue just has the better players across the board here. They're the deeper team. You saw what Kaufman, Wren, and Clough were just able to do, reinvigorated on the boards, out rebounding a Nebraska team by 24 rebounds in that game. That I think personnel-wise is similar to Iowa. If Clough and TKR want to, I think they can do the same thing to Iowa on the boards in this game. So I think at some point Purdue's going to have sort of a gut check, maybe knife in them game where it decides their Big Ten hopes. They can't lose another. I'd be surprised if it's here. It may be in Mackey Arena against Michigan next week. Let's get Troy back in here for some trends. Troy, anything to add?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I really don't like the line at -1.5 for Purdue. That I was thinking it would be much higher because I think they are in a different class than Iowa. But 1.5 just gives me pause, like there's something I don't know. But what I do know about this game is and this is specific on props, which we don't talk about a lot, but player props, if you can get them, they're in select markets. But you talk about Bennett Sturtz and how he's been on a heater. He scored 30 points in 3 or 4 games. He's scored at least 20 points in what seems like 15 games. But if you break it down, let's see at some of the teams he scored 20 or more points against recently: Maryland, Northwestern, Washington, Oregon, USC, Rutgers, Indiana. Before that, the games that he scored under 20 points, ranked Purdue, ranked Illinois, ranked Iowa State, ranked Michigan State. So if I can't believe I'm saying I would take an under on Bennett Sturt's points, but to your point that I was going to need more people than just him, and he hasn't been performing in the 20 plus range of points against ranked teams, and Purdue really needs this win. That is an under I would be on, and also Braden Smith unders the scoring sensation for Purdue. He hasn't put up 20 points in a while. Fletcher Loyer has been far more not an efficient scorer, has scored more. So I would probably be on unders for Bennett Sturtz and Braden Smith, even though the first time they played, I was hammering the overs on both. I do think Purdue is the better team. I do think they should win this game. The trends are all over the map. I believe it's Purdue is failed to cover in like 5 of 7. But they've hit overs. Iowa's hit unders. This is a game that is being bet in the favor of Purdue, about 80%. of the tickets and the money to win outright, and in about 85% of the tickets and the money to cover the spread. Now it is still early, so there's time for that to come down to earth. But I think the public will be backing Purdue, and I do think Purdue wins. But I don't know if I can bet. If I were going to, I would be alt line thinking that Purdue is going to win by 5 or 6.
That's an interesting angle too. I think if you do think Purdue is just definitively the better team, maybe get a little better value on the plus money, slide that down a little bit. I don't hate that, Troy. Okay. A few more games to look at here. More on Saturday, including a non-conference affair for Jake Diebler's Ohio State Buckeyes. One of these random games in Nashville here. Virginia favored by 5.5. Totals 147.5. What do you think, Doug?
I really like this Virginia team. I mean, this is not a Tony Bennett coach team, right? The offense can pop. And this Ohio State team, we kind of know their limitations, right? Like they're nice at times, but they can't really show up in the biggest of games. Like they were laying 7.5 against USC, although they kind of should have covered in the last minute. Got a late backdoor for the Trojans, but we kind of know who they are. 10-point home dogs to Michigan, lose by 20. That's kind of who they are, but they're solid enough that they can take care of business against bad teams. I think Virginia can pull away here, and it is in Nashville, so it's sort of a home court advantage, if you will, or at least the crowd, I would guess, but maybe split, maybe split. But either way, I just think Virginia has more ways to kind of get the ball in the hoop, and they come at you with an up tempo and push the pace. Once they get in the half court sets, I think they can take care of business here. So I lean to the Hoos here.
Yeah, this is not an opponent I'd want to see if I'm Ohio State. It's one of those games where obviously it's a resume boost opportunity, and maybe a win in this game could honestly go a long way toward their NCAA tournament chances. But it's not exactly like an opportunity at a Duke or a team that has a little more sex appeal nationally and gets everybody's attention if you beat them. Virginia is very good. I think they're undervalued analytically at this point in the year. 20th on KenPom through this point in the season, but if you go back to just January 1st, since the new year has turned, this is the 11th best team in the country, sandwiched in between Iowa State and Purdue. I think that reflects who they are. They're an elite rebounding team, the third best offensive rebounding team in the country. I look at this Ohio State front line, just not good on the boards, not physical enough with Tilly down there at the 5. I think this is a game the Virginia front court propels them forward through into a double-digit win. And shout out to Jake Diebler, by the way, because since he beat Eric Musselman, now this becomes a Jake Diebler letdown spot. He's been alternating wins and losses for 3 weeks. And anytime you can fade Jake Diebler fresh off a win, it's typically a good idea to do so. I'm with you, Doug. Next up's a fun game on Saturday that I'm looking forward to. I've got a big play here. Northwestern at Nebraska. The Cornhuskers favored by 13.5 at Pinnacle Bank following that overtime loss to Purdue. Totals 143.5. What do you think?
I'm on the favorite here. I know I've been laying some lumber with the Huskers and not always getting there recently, but I think this is a mismatch. I faded Northwestern the last game, and they got fortunate thanks to a very surprising first half. But I think this is all Nebraska here. I just think they're so much better. I laid I want to say 5.5 when they played earlier in Illinois, and I know it's a big number and everything, but I feel like Nebraska's been up to the challenge in a lot of ways. When when they were new to the scene, if you will, on the national landscape, a lot of people were trying to fade them. And I keep coming back to this game, but they were at Minnesota. And everyone thought they sort of stubbed their toe there. And they had just that monster second half after trailing, outscored the Gophers by 25. And that really impressed me a lot. So I think this Nebraska team's up for a lot of challenges. They're off a loss to Purdue. They were so resilient to force overtime. And I think they're going to sort of get right here, even though they've lost 3 of 4. So to ask a team to cover 2 touchdowns here, I still think it's the right side. And I haven't been all that impressed with Northwestern, despite the first half in the last game.
I was hoping you'd be on the same side as me. I'm all over the favorite here. I love this Nebraska team. I think it's the right time to buy low on them. Single digit losses at Michigan, at home against Illinois. They led by 6 at halftime in that game, and then in overtime against Purdue after that furious comeback. The concern here would be any lingering emotional or even physical concerns following a 45-minute basketball game against Purdue. However, I just trust this team. I think they've got star power. I think they play so cohesively as a unit. It's such a difficult defense to prepare for. They force you to shoot over half your shots from three, and Northwestern simply cannot do that. Northwestern doesn't shoot threes, and they certainly don't make threes. They're 298th in the country in three-point shooting percentage this year, making just 31%. These two teams played once this year already in Evanston. It went about exactly how I'm anticipating it goes again. Northwestern only attempted 14 threes against the Nebraska defense that begs you to shoot threes. They lost by 19 in their home arena. I think this is just the worst possible matchup for a Northwestern team that can't shoot. And you have a Nebraska team foaming at the mouth to get back in the win column. They can certainly do that in an emphatic way at home in Lincoln here. One huge game in the Big Ten on Sunday. I think this may be the game I'm most curious about this weekend. Indiana at Illinois. 2 straight losses for the Illini. Kylan Boswell is listed as questionable for this game. He could return for the first time in a month. But remember, Andrei Stojakovic was scratched late before that Illinois loss to Wisconsin earlier this week. An Indiana team is playing much better. We'll see if it travels into Champaign. 10.5-point dogs are the Hoosiers. Big total here at 153.5. What do you like, Doug?
The Stojakovic news was definitely caught me by surprise the other day, and I think that probably proved to be the difference, right? They're shorthanded last couple games. I'm not I know Illinois is in a bounce back spot here, but I'm not like rushing to bet them. But I just don't think Indiana is the team you want. Look, if they bomb threes and hit them, obviously they're going to cover. I just think this is a wide range of outcomes. I think 10.5 is a pretty good number. I would actually lean to the dog here. I know Illinois just lost, and you want to kind of bet on a really good team. Focus favorites are always the best team to bet on, but I think this number's a little too high. I think it should be like 8.5, 9, but I'm not in a rush to play it. But if I had to play it, it'd be IU.
Yeah, what an interesting time in Illinois' schedule to lose your best 2 perimeter defenders right before playing John Blackwell and Nick Boyd, and now Lamar Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries. It's like the 2 teams in the league that are superstar dependent with perimeter scorers that you need those guys for. The status of Stojakovic and Boswell is the whole story here for me. If you could guarantee me that those guys are available, I love Illinois minus 10.5. If you could guarantee me one of them is available, I think I probably play Illinois minus 10.5. If they don't have either, I would be all over Indiana potentially on the money line, which I do have to brag to you guys. I jumped on Wisconsin live early in that game after watching a couple possessions. They've got serious problems athletically if they're without those 2. So my encouragement to any bettors on this would really be wait for some injury news here. And if you can get some finalizations, whether it's an hour before the game or just visual clarification of who's in the starting lineup, I think you know how to play this game. They're not going to be able to guard Lamar Wilkerson if they're missing both of those guys. If they have even one of them, they'll have an easier chance. Let's get Troy back in here. Troy, any additional thoughts for us?
Yeah, I have to agree with Doug here. I think there's a potential for a lot of bombing from outside. But my concern with leaning on the dog, and again, this is projected line at 10.5. Ken Pom has Illinois winning 82-71. Is that if they're not hitting it from outside, options are limited. I think they're going to get eaten up on the interior by Indiana and Illinois. Illinois' rebounding far superior. I believe Indiana is like one of the worst 50 teams when it comes to getting rejected inside the paint. And Illinois is one of the top 50 teams in block percentage when they're on defense. Their offensive rebounding is great. I think there's going to be more possessions for Illinois. So I would probably lean Indiana to cover, depending on the line. But the more interesting play for me is just because of that injury news, because of the potential for not a sweet shooting night and a lot of rebounds, is under 153.5 if that's the line. And potentially get it now If you, as soon as it's up, and if it is 153.5, if there are injuries, that line is going to come down. So if you can get it at, a good price at a higher number and play the under. Now these teams have the potential to play in the 150s, absolutely. But I just think, on a Sunday, it could be a little bit sluggish. After watching all those games on Saturday, I think there is reason to think and believe that this could be played in the 140s. If it's not a hot shooting night. Now, another thing you could do is, if there isn't a ton of injuries, is wait and bet it live early and just see what the pace is. Obviously, a pace, doesn't play out over 40 minutes because there are ebbs and flows like every college basketball game. But I think if I'm not going to race to the under on a high number early, I'm going to wait and try to get it if they come out sluggish, and see if I can still get that number in the 150s and play to the under.
Interesting. I agree, Troy. Live is the way for me to play this game. And we didn't even mention this, but Tatum Connerway, Indiana's best perimeter defender, also a guy that has been battling injury. I believe he's played 14 minutes in the last couple Indiana games. So plenty of question marks for Indiana, Illinois this weekend. All right, that is our full scout of games for the Big Ten this weekend. Let's close the show, as always, with our favorite best bet for the weekend slate. What's your best bet, Doug?
I'm torn between two, and I think I know which one you're going to take. So I'm going to take Virginia here, neutral site against Ohio State. I just think the shooting of Virginia has been really impressive, and I think they have more flexibility, more versatility on offense. Ohio State does some nice things. I just don't think they're going to be able to kind of stay attached to UVA for 40 full minutes. So I'll lay the number in Nashville with Virginia.
That's why you got to love playing with a pass-first point guard like Doug Kezirian. He just sets you up so nicely. If you had taken my best bet, which is going to be Nebraska minus 13.5, I would have taken Virginia. So just let that be known.
Nice.
We both love each other's plays. But, yeah, I think it's a smash spot. The Cornhuskers are for real. Don't overreact to this 3 out of 4 losing streak. They showed their mettle and their skill in that Purdue comeback. This is a venomous place to go play. I think they've lost just 2 games in ranked mass Nebraska career at home. And I think they're ready to pounce on an overwhelmed Northwestern team. Hey, reminder, this show is part of College Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Sports Network. You can also watch Sports Bettor's Paradise with Jimmy Ott every single week. Don't forget to get that bonus bet promotion before time expires. As we said at the top of the show, this offer ends on February 15th. So that $10 bonus bet with bonus code CSR22 is still eligible for you in the Bet Rivers app this weekend. For Troy, for Doug, for our entire team behind the scenes, thank you so much for watching. Good luck with your bets this weekend, and we'll see you next week.